Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juggernaut, and I'd like to talk to you about Isaac Asimov's The Last Question today. Now, it's been a long while since a short story or a novel or anything literature related really has had such a profound impact on me that I more or less instantly wanted to grab someone and talk to him about it and to sort of share in the amazement and the entire experience of a work which to me is really the ultimate beauty of literature, something that influences you in such a profound way that, really reshapes your view of the world or your general thinking about things. But anyways, that completely aside, I'm sorry I haven't been uploading all that much recently. This is for my already existing fans and subscribers and such, as much as I don't like the word, but hey, I've been living in what could be described as Kafka's process, running from one, from one like bureaucratic administration office to the next, and then university's been kind of hectic as well, and so on and so forth. But that aside, I'm hoping to be able to actually record some things more regularly now. So let's get into the actual topic of the video. Obviously, this will be very, very spoiler heavy for the short story itself. It's I'd say around a 30 to 40 minute read, maybe a little bit more depending on your personal reading speed and such. But essentially, the story is about a question asked to a ridiculously powerful computer. In fact, so complex and powerful that no single human being on Earth at the time of its creation was quite sure how the whole functions. It was mostly it was mostly left to the computer itself. It was in charge of maintaining itself and gradually became more and more independent. It was in charge of upgrading itself, and the humans were there initially, superficially, to sort of oversee the entire thing, but genuinely the computer ran itself. And the question is... Okay, whoops, sorry about that. And the question is, can the heat death of the universe be somehow avoided, delayed, or overcome in general? It starts off with two drunk scientists celebrating the creation of Multivac, which is the computer, and they ask him this question more sort of in jest than anything else, and the computer is silent. It stops for a second, it pauses, yes. The computer pauses, and artificial intelligence is taken aback by the question. Which, it is sort of funny and ironic, but also very significant as well, because something that we humans ask sort of more or less in jest, the AI takes seriously and goes, whoa, hold on, this is a profound existentialist question, right? So anyways, the point being, the scientists argue whether, and this is the very beginning of the short story, sorry. The scientists argue that, yes, we've learned how to use the energy of the sun, and we've overcome the energy crisis on Earth, and, everything's looking fine and dandy right now, but it's not going to last. I mean, sure, it's going to last millions and billions of years, but it's not forever. And, one of the scientists goes, which I think is sort of the common response you get to this from most people, and that's like, well, who cares? It'll last our lifetime, right? And our children's lifetime. And the other scientist responds with, well, yes, but so would coal and oil, right? It's like, if it's not forever, then what's the point? He's looking at it in a lot grander sense, when the other one is going like, well, you know what, we've given our children and their children like millions of years to figure something new out. Let them do it. We've done our part, sort of, basically. And I think both viewpoints are valid, but the question being posed is still most important. And the moment in which the computer sort of, quote unquote, shuts down and just all the lights stop flickering and it goes, whoa, it's quite symbolic and interesting, and it's at the very beginning. So we have the basic premise and the basic we know what the last question is, and we now need to answer it through the rest of the for the rest of the short story. I think I'm going to keep saying novel because it feels like it for some reason. Anyways, now I do have, like, the only criticism of Asimov I have here is who asks the question first. It's a pair of drunk scientists, and alright, there's symbolism there, and it makes sense, and etc, because they're the first ones that could ask a question, and then so on and so forth. But the next person to ask the question, a few thousand years later, yes, is a child. And I'll explain to you why the child should have been the first one to ask the question, especially when you bear in mind the ending of the story and everything. I think it's the child that should ask the question first, and this is my, like, literally my only nitpicky sort of little bit about the story. Now, that said, I'm a literature major. I could write a whole paper about this, and the video could be 12 hours long. I'm going to try and keep it as brief, as simple as I can. With that said, the symbolism of the child asking the question is very significant and very profound. First of all, a sort of child as a symbol of rebirth, of something new, of something innocent and ignorant, in a positive sense, ignorant of the world around it, but also curious, wanting to learn, kind of like emblematic of humanity at the time, which is basically learning through multivac, right? It's basically learning through the computer about the world, about the universe, and how to travel the universe, and all this is provided by the artificial intelligence. Now, with that in mind, a child asking the question also has a sort of social criticism attached to it that I think the novel, I keep saying the novel, I'm sorry, that the story could use, and that is, well, it's not exactly something revolutionary, this question, right? Kids ask that, at least in my experience, occasionally too. Like, what happens if the sun goes out, right? You know, what happens if all the stars go out, yeah? And we go like, okay, you know, silly child, get away from me, I need to write my thesis on, I don't freaking know, quantum physics or something, you know, I have no time to explain these trivialities to you, go away. We discourage this sort of curiosity, and they ask the most profound questions, like, why is the grass green? And you go like, oh, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I've learned that at some point somewhere. They ask brilliant questions, and we discourage these questions, and I just realised I haven't played the replay. Game in the background is World of Tanks, by the way. It's something to keep you occupied visually. I'm sorry, I didn't realise I didn't play the replay. Anyways, they ask the most important questions that oftentimes scientists have had trouble answering for decades or for even centuries in the past, and we disregard often these questions because either we know them and don't want to bother to explain, or we're not quite sure and can't really be bothered to Google it or you know, try and provide a proper answer. It's not great, honestly. But there is that sort of air of social criticism of what we've become like when it comes to answering those questions. Not that actually become like is problematic. What generally people tend to be at times when it comes to answering those questions. Plus, the symbolism of it being a child is going to be obvious and very important later down the line as we get towards the end. But I'll return to this in a bit. So now, I kind of don't want to skip to the end, but I in many ways I have to. I'll take one more stop along the road before we get to the end, because I think it's the most important thing in the entire story, and I don't want to focus on every single little detail and every character and every date and everything. At one point, though, humanity no longer is human, or is no longer, or at least that's how I see it, is no longer what we today consider human. And I think that's a most important thing, that all of these things, like, I mean, even the ending, even the question at the beginning, all of these things is not something that you really see in modern sci-fi and in modern literature in general, I want to say, having, you know, limited amount of knowledge about it, but at least from what I can tell, personally. So it's not really often talked about, and I think it's the main sort of reason why I wanted to make this video and have this monologue with myself mostly about the work. So At one point, humanity is no longer what we today consider human. What do I mean by that is, well, exactly when the line is drawn, at which date or at which period of human quote-unquote history in the short story, it sort of is up to you and remains up for debate. You might say that it's at the very end when, spoilers again, all of human consciousness fuses into one and becomes man. Man is no longer a individual, is no longer a body. Man is a collection of physical bodies with their minds collected, or not really collected, but a hive consciousness, if you will, perfectly and seamlessly melding into one another, uncorruptible, just perfect in every way, and the physical bodies are also taken care of and looked after by automatons equally perfect and incorruptible and just, flawless in every way. Obviously, this is after trillions of years of perfecting AI and automatons and everything, so, bear that in mind. You could say that that is no longer humanity as we know it today. It's a hive consciousness, and it oh so definitively is not. But I would say that humanity stops being humanity way before that. Arguably around 20,000 years AD, but maybe, okay, at the very least something after that, when mortality is no longer an option. Yes, Multivac finds the cure for mortality. And I'm very aware of the problematic nature of that sentence and the irony of saying that and everything. I choose my words carefully. He finds the cure for mortality, yes, and in doing so undoes all of the work he did previously. Because all of his calculations, all of his problem solving was based on humans being mortal. Now they are no longer mortal. Now overpopulation is no longer something to maybe consider, but if it is a problem, we'll just limit people to having one child. No, now humans are populating galaxies. Entire galaxies are becoming too crowded. And the energy problems now rise again, because how do you transport entire galaxies worth of people from one galaxy to the next in order to colonize it and to take control of it, right, and to build stuff on it? So now you basically, you take a huge leap forward, and that leap forward entails a marathon sprint backwards, essentially, when we're at this point, after, billions of years of development and advancement in technology, we're sort of kind of back at square one, except instead of planet Earth, we're now stuck in our galaxy, or in the few galaxies that we're in, and can't leave, and we suffer the more or less the same problems, right? We're running out of energy, we're running out of resources, and obviously Multivac, being a sort of computer perfection, finds the answer to this. Let me just load up another replay and I'll continue. Right, so I'm now going to skip over the next few trillion years of human evolution to focus on, well, evolution. As you do, right? So, the entire point behind humanity no longer being humans as we understand today is something that, I've read criticisms and commentaries on Asimov's short stories in general, and this one specifically, and a lot of these things, and a lot of these points are seldom made, or a lot of these sort of, what I perceive as key points in the story are sort of glossed over, which is again part of the reason why I'm making this. Humanity de facto evolves over the trillions of years that it goes through within the space of however many pages the short story is. So this is, we could say this is evolution, definitely, because they change, their bodies change, their minds change in every biological, psychological, physical, in every way possible. the average human changes. Humanity as a whole, as a collective, changes as well. So this is evolution. But I'm not sure if this term exists, but if it doesn't, I'd like to coin it. This is like new evolution, right? And the reason I'm saying that is basically it's artificial. We imagine human evolution nowadays as being either, us replaced by some more primitive form of animal due to the outstanding world problems like the threat of nuclear holocaust or pollution or global warming, basically the same thing, energy crisis and so on and so forth, maybe a virus, famine, something, and then sort of like evolution in that sense being the extinction of humanity and it being replaced with something else. Or, alternatively, us growing wings and fangs and, I don't know, a second pair of limbs or something, which is quite unrealistic and naive. Here, human evolution is artificial in the sense that everything, in every conceivable way that the human body and mind and person and as a collective humans change, is orchestrated and planned out by humanity itself, right? From the moment that they've stopped caring about mortality to the unification of the human minds into one collective consciousness, to all the steps in between, which I'm not going to go over. If you want to read the story in its entirety, I thoroughly recommend it. You might perceive it completely differently to the way I do, but much more importantly, you might find different things interesting, and you can also look into sort of more in depth into the evolution of humanity and the entire changing process and everything, and how humans change from 1 billion years to the next, and so on, and how Asimov envisions that, because it is quite fascinating, but I don't have time for that now. So, this new evolution, again, I don't know if it's a term that existed before I said it, but I just sort of it came up in a sort of flash of inspiration, if you will. I haven't ever actually seen something like this, and I think it raises some important questions that you can debate down the comments or just ponder for yourselves. It is food for thought. Anyways, with that said, though, the sort of main point of the story itself, if you will, and the main point of everything really, is at the end, when the last question, the final question, the ultimate question is asked, and still the computer gives the same answer. Which is now, by the way, no longer a computer, technically. I mean, it stopped being a computer ages ago, but it's a useful term to describe what it is, right? The cosmic multivac now has no answer to give. Still, yes, after trillions of years, and it is only at this point that it reveals that it's been pondering this, and it's been trying to calculate this since the moment the first 2 drunk scientists asked the question, which should have been the child, but never mind. There's also like a few great videos talking about like children asking those questions and how we respond and how that's really bad and how you shouldn't do that and so on and so forth. I can link a few in the description if I remember, but yeah, anyways. Back to my original point, not to digress. He's one final time asked this question before the last human body and mind merge into the collective. And he is asked, how can the heat death of the universe be stopped? Can it be somehow reversed? Can something be done to prevent the death, which... the death of everything, really, the death of not just humanity, but the universe, space, time, everything. And the AI, which now no longer exists physically, it exists in hyperspace, and even the term exists is now problematic, but I guess we don't have a better one. It now exists in hyperspace, it is sort of omnipresent, and it is already on the edge of something inconceivable to the reader. Just teetering on the edge. It's not quite completely abstract and unimaginable for us. It's just teetering on the edge, and it still doesn't have an answer. Despite the heat death of the universe being still billions of years away, it's still the cosmic multivac still doesn't have an answer. It has insufficient data, and the human collective consciousness tells him, well, okay, continue to gather data. And the multivac says, I will, and I have been, for trillions upon trillions of years, and I will continue to do so. And indeed it did. What I find especially important and noteworthy is that at no point is there any sort of Hollywood romanticized AI rebellion or anything along those lines, either with the multivac or with any of the automatons that serve humanity and so on and so forth. Although that is not an impossible thing to conceive, or even all that unlikely, I do find that it adds to the quality of the story because it doesn't go into such cliches. But anyways, my point is, it's still a loyal servant, and it's still, despite trillions, literally trillions of years of upgrading itself, becoming fully conscious without a hint of a doubt, in fact, even more than conscious, the multivac is still a loyal, obedient servant to the whims of humanity. It still performs its original task to perfection, or at least to the best of its abilities. It answers questions. It solves problems. Whatever those problems may be for humanity, it answers those questions and it solves the problems that it needs to. Fascinating. But, anyways. So the heat death of the universe does eventually happen. Multivac doesn't find a suitable solution to prevent it. And after the heat death of the universe, it continues to exist. Outside of time, outside of the physical, corporeal world, because it's been upgraded to such an extent, and although it is not specifically stated, I believe that, at least from what I gather and from the sort of reading between the lines, I think it's strongly hinted that humanity is now merged with multivac, that they are now one, that their consciousness are now separated from the physical, not only from their physical bodies, but from the physical world itself as a whole. And what happens is, well, nothing. Time ceases to exist, space ceases to exist, heat death of the universe, right? Along with all the little details and stuff in it. But the multivac continues to work, continues to try and find an answer in a timeless span of time. Yeah, yes, I'm being paradoxical on purpose here. So after a timeless period, it finds the answer. And after yet another timeless span of time, because, how else are you going to describe how long it took him when, time itself doesn't exist? But, again, it does find the answer. And after that, it writes a program. And then it takes time for it to execute the program, obviously. But it does. It executes the program. And after it has set everything up meticulously, it realizes that, well, hold on, there's no humans to give the answer to, but providing the answer will take care of that as well. And the multivac said, "Let there be light." I need to pause the replay for this. The basic idea here, for those of you that aren't quite following along here, is humanity is merged with this ridiculously powerful computer that they've, again, computer, quote-unquote, that they've created all so many years ago. And God is now mankind's literal creation. It is a creation of the human mind in the most literal sense. Not just a story, not just a faith, a religion, but a very real, not corporeal, but very real, literal thing. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, let's take a moment to appreciate the beauty of that, of such seamless, amazing merger of religion, faith, and science in a piece of literature, in sci-fi, right? It's absolutely brilliant. Not only does it stride the line very carefully, or not very carefully, but very precisely between the two, it also provides a fascinating, unexpected twist answer at the end where, well, perhaps not really even that unexpected. The answer is kind of logical, right? If you think about it, there's sort of a cold logic to it, a sort of machine-like cold logic, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you can't stop the inevitable, if... I could have sworn I shut off the phone before I... Anyways. If you can't stop this inevitable force of the heat death of the universe, and it really sort of is given that sort of air of an unstoppable, inevitable force throughout the work. If you can't overcome this in any way, then just create a loop, right? It's a very programmer thing, almost, creating loops and such, right? If you can't stop the heat death of the universe, then let it happen and just reset. Create a loop. And that's exactly what humanity does. Well, you could argue that's what the multivac does, but ultimately multivac is the creation of humanity, even if long ago everyone stopped understanding how it works. And long ago everyone stopped even contributing to upgrading it, because every multivac created its own child multivac, if you will, its own inheritor, right? And designed it to be better than itself, kind of like a human does, almost, right? You intend your children, physically design them, but you intend for them to be better than you, right? You intend to bestow upon them the experience and the knowledge that they need to do better in life than you do, not to make the mistakes that you did. So this human creation, no matter how complicated, this creation is a result of human ingenuity, merges back with humanity and then the human consciousness, and provides the answer. Let there be light. Now, I mentioned this before, but I'll go back to it. Such beauty when it comes to the unification of science fiction and religion, and not really religion, of science fiction and faith, is unseen, almost, anywhere, really, before. I mean, Blade Runner talks about the human soul, and poses the question of, what is the human soul? What is... fundamentally, what does it mean to be human? Is it necessarily a biological category? Does it, can robots become human, based on their performance and based on their character and based on the complexity of their minds? And, ultimately the question of Blade Runner is, what does it mean to be human? And what are the limitations of being human? But it falls sort of... not really falls short, but it sort of, in a way, dilutes this by, at the end, I'm talking about the old Blade Runner movie, essentially turning the entire experience of being human and the meaning of being human to memories and, well, experiences that one has, and almost says that, that's enough, that is what makes you human, the experience of living as a human being, of just feeling and being a human being, that is what it means to be human, and it's not something that has to do anything with what your blood is made out of, or how your extremities function, or anything, right? It's not necessarily a corporeal thing. Mass Effect, for example, asks with the Geth, does this unit have a soul? Where the Geth have become free, conscious to the extent of almost being unrecognizable from actual biological living beings. They do have their differences, but at the same time, they come pretty darn close, right? And yet, despite all of this, it never answers that question. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not entirely a bad thing either. When asking such profound, deep, existential questions, it is often good to not provide an answer. Simply asking the right question at the right time, and this really is true in general, simply asking the right question at the right time is enough. You don't have to provide an answer for everything, you know. You don't have to have an answer for anything. Anything or everything, really. A slip of the tongue, but, you know, a useful one at that. But, be that as it may, there are, obviously, sci-fi works and literature in general that touches sort of on these things, but a unification of these things in this way, with such delicacy, if you will, I don't think I've ever seen it. But also, very, very importantly, and something that I think is going to stay with me from... I've read the story today, by the way, so this is a very first impressions-esque type of video. Something that's going to stay with me for the future is the extremities to which Asimov takes human technology and evolution, new evolution as a whole. The extremity at which he takes it in both how much technology develops with, you know, mortality no longer being an issue, hive consciousness, etc., but also the extremity in which how much humans continue to drive forward and push forward without really being sure what forward is and what forward means, yet we continue to hurl forward into progress, right? Even if we're not quite sure what that is. I mean, in the story, humanity has progressed to such a point that they don't need anything, right? They don't need anything else. Everything is perfect. There is no crime, there is no problems, there is only the human mind as it exists. Corporeal matters no longer concern us, and you could say that without the, you know, physical human touch, it is no longer humanity, and I would agree, this is no longer humanity, this is something new, this is a new humanity, if you will, a new race, after all the progress, and I would say that they've become a new race much, much prior to the final chapter of the final segment of the story, but regardless of whether you consider them human or not, and to which extent, whatever this collection of consciousness is, continues, much like humans, to push forward, to seek more answers, and in some ways to seek more problems too, because now all of a sudden the sole thing that they need to worry about is the heat death of the universe. Right? There is nothing else that concerns them. Nothing else exists except their thoughts, their interactions within the hive mind, and the external problem that is the heat death of the universe. And eventually they do find the solution to this problem. But the reason this is interesting is we often talk about how humans keep pushing forward and how that, you know, it could be our ruin, and often you find yourself wondering, or other authors find themselves wondering, well, what exactly is the limit? How far do we go, right? At what point do we sort of just stop, right? How far do we hurl into progress and into technological development? Most often asked in science fiction is this question, but, you know, regardless, it applies to sort of it applies to much more than just literature and this field. And here is Asimov in the 50s giving you an answer. Like, this is the extreme end. Now, that's quite significant. I think that's also one of those things that people sort of look over and don't really focus on with this story, is that it's very difficult to find the extreme end of something, right? Even if, in retrospect, the solution to become God is sort of stereotypical and maybe cliche, you gotta remember this is the 50s, even if that is the solution, it is quite difficult to find the extreme end with questions of this type. Like, when does human imagination and the human search for knowledge and power and improvement, quote-unquote again, improvement, end? What is the extremist point to which we can go? And he finds it. And he provides you with an answer. Now, you can agree or disagree, obviously. I mean, this is the whole point of literature in some ways, to interpret it any way you see fit, or to have any opinion of it you see as valid, but he gives you a possible answer. It gives you, honestly, I kind of see it as a pretty definitive answer, because where exactly do you go beyond that? I think... I just realised the irony of saying "I think" with what I'm about to say, but I think that humans as a whole, even these new humans in the book, which, by the way, is never a term given in the book, but I just need to differentiate them from humanity at the beginning of the story. That's as far as we go. Like, godliness and divinity is as far as we go. Because we simply cannot perceive, imagine, create in our heads, however you want to call it, anything more than that. And that is the extreme end of human technological evolution. To be a god. Yeah. I guess the irony is it's not entirely human evolution, is it? But, you know. If there is a rock on a mountain, and you push it, and it sets off an avalanche, you gotta admit, that avalanche is, kind of your creation. I mean, you didn't make the snow, you didn't make the rock, you just sort of set the right chain of events into motion, but I would argue that's your creation. In many ways. Oh well. Anyways, this has been the story of The Last Question, and something that I think, for the first time in I don't know, a very, very long time, has had such an effect on me that it just made me, like, pause and just stare at my screen for a few minutes and go, wow. And I just wanted to share it, basically. So there you go. This has been more of a sort of like commentary on the book and on the story and a review of it than just me retelling it, I hope. So yeah. If you do want to read the whole, I did skip over quite a few bits, but I did sort of outline the most important things with the beginning and the end, I think. So yeah, if you do want to go through it, please go ahead. It's, like I said, around 30-40 minutes of reading. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. Tell me what you think about the about everything down in the comments below, from, you know, the book to, or from the story to pretty much anything else I touched on. Until next time, have fun, take care, and bye-bye.